Great. And thanks everybody for joining today. When Mark asked me to present, I was trying to think what topic to present today. And I was trying to think what is something that's practical but not often spoken about. And to me, moving the content and what that means popped into my head. So that's what I selected today, and depicted here with the walruses doing their migration from Antarctica to who knows where. So today we'll start off with a small introduction of me, your speaker today, where we are moving, the considerations when we're moving, and the options that we have. And today is really going to be an overview. It's not going to be specifically a deep dive into any one particular tool, but I think it will still be great content for everyone that's not had to move any content before. And then we'll wrap up with some questions. So with that said, I am Jason de Los Reyes. I am a solution architect. I currently work with Booz Allen Hamilton and Action Analytics, where I work with several startups, helping them deploy Tableau Server and build dashboards and server tuning, and pretty much everything in between. Before my time with Action Analytics, I was working in Tableau professional services based out of the Washington, D.C. office, which makes sense because that's where I live today, in Washington, D.C. with my wife and daughter. Too fast. So let's jump right into today's talk. Where are you moving your content? So when we're thinking about moving our content, there are really three high-level areas where we're going to be moving our content. It's either going to be between projects, between sites, or between environments. And depending on where we're moving is going to present different tools that we're going to want to use or to consider before moving those objects around. And when we're thinking about moving our content, we should really think about and plan what it is we need to move. Are we moving only workbooks and data sources? Do we need to move projects? Do we need to move custom views? Do we need to move users and groups and subscriptions, extract refreshes and I already said subscriptions, but more than just your basic workbooks and more than data sources? And how much are you moving? Is it a handful of items? Is it an entire production site? And do you have the credentials? Probably many of you have had to move credentials or change ownership of a workbook or a data source, and all of a sudden you're presented with the problem of, why doesn't it work anymore? Why doesn't my data source work anymore? Why won't it connect? And as a security feature, Tableau Server will remove those credentials from those workbooks or from those data sources. So if we have those on hand, it will make that migration that much smoother. And finally, the last overarching consideration I want to present to you guys today is, clean your room. And that's true when you're moving in real life, and it's definitely true when you're moving in Tableau. When I've moved between apartments, it's a great time to get rid of all of those unopened pieces of mail or this stale thing in the back of the refrigerator. Clean it out. You don't want to take it with you to where you're going. And the same is true for moving content. When you're moving content between Tableau Server environments, it's really, if you're moving your stale content, it's going to complicate your migration. And especially, I would say, if you have zombie users. And zombie users are probably one of the biggest pain points that I have personally encountered when moving content between environments. You come into a situation where you have your workbooks and your data sources, and they're associated to someone that has left your organization. But because they have left your organization, they're no longer in Active Directory as your identity store, but they remain on Tableau Server because they own content. And so now you have that disconnect between your identity store and your Tableau Server. And no amount of Active Directory syncing is going to clean that up, and that will definitely cause problems for you. So clean your room when you're moving your content. Some of the options that we're going to talk about today, and this list here, I've kind of structured it in probably what I would consider maybe the most flexible to least flexible but most content. Starting with the manual process, and the manual process here, I'm describing it as downloading those workbooks or data sources and moving them to that new environment. So we're downloading it to our local machine and we're uploading it to that new content to our target site. The next tool is probably officially the newest one on the list, but has existed in some variation for some time, and that's the Tableau Content Migration Tool. And the Tableau Content Migration Tool is a standalone application that's really good for moving content between projects and servers, and adds a lot of customization for users to move that content. The next tool I'll be discussing today is TabMigrate, and anyone that has had to move any content or any great volume of content has probably encountered TabMigrate. It's a great tool, open source tool, and it's good for moving content between multiple server environments. Then I'll touch briefly on the API, which some of you may or may not be familiar with. Then I'll go into the site export and import process, and a little bit about the pitfalls that I've kind of already alluded to that can happen when you're moving objects through a site import and export. And then finally, I'll wrap up with restoring from a backup. So let's talk about the manual process. The manual process is the method of downloading and republishing content through the front-end Tableau Server GUI. I would consider it a low complexity, and it's really good to use because it is Tableau supported, and it is able to be done on Tableau Online or Tableau Server, and it doesn't matter if you're on Linux or if you're on Windows. This is out-of-the-box functionality that Tableau Server offers users that have those permissions. With that said, I think it's clear, you need to be clear to understand that it can be time-consuming because it is a one-at-a-time process. So if you need to move, I would say maybe less. If you're moving between projects, I think using this manual process is a good choice. Or if you're going between projects, it's a really good choice. Or if it's a small amount of objects, if you're moving between environments or sites, also probably a good idea. But with that said, you are limited to what you can move, and it is limited to only those workbooks and data sources. You're not going to be copying, a user list, or you're not going to be copying schedules. You probably could using the Postgres, but I would consider that a little bit more advanced and outside of the manual method here. So just something to think about. The next tool here is the content migration tool. And the content migration tool has existed for some time. It was, I like to think of it as the application formerly known as, the power tools for deployment. So those of you that remember the Interworks Power Tools applications, Tableau did acquire the Power Tools applications a few years back. And the content migration tool is the new incarnation of the Power Tools for deployment. Now, the Power Tools for deployment is a really great option when we're talking about moving content between projects and maybe even customizing what that move is going to look like. The content migration tool is good for modifying anything in bulk. If we want to modify calculations, that's something that can be done. If we want to modify parameters, initial SQLs, data connections, if we need to update a bulk of data connections, it can be done using the content migration tool. So it's really good for updating and managing, or even if you had to consolidate projects into one project, it's a really great tool to do that all at once. The other great thing I would say is that it is also Tableau supported, but it is a standalone application, and it is available with the data management add-on. So if your organization has the data management add-on, this is a tool that is available to you. At this point in time, the CMT is only operable on a Windows box. So that's just something to keep in mind for those of you that are in a Linux environment. It will interact with the Linux environment, but the machine that the CMT is installed on should be Windows. Now, anybody can use the CMT as long as they have an Explorer license and if they have the view download rights. But optionally, if you can use the workbooks or access a user list if you are an administrator. Now, when you're moving content, it's the process can be as complex or as simple as you need it to be. The process, it's 3 simple steps or seemingly simple steps. The bulk of the work is going to happen in our configuration plan. In the configuration plan, where we will select our servers and source projects, and then we'll go into the workbooks and then the views, and then we'll be able to select what we want to move. So it is a lot of really good functionality. I would say at this point in time, if you're trying to move anything, it's really good for customizing your migration. Or if you're trying to do work in transit, it's really good for those sorts of things. If you're looking to include a little bit more content beyond modifying and then moving those workbooks and data sources, I'm trying to look at my notes here. So there are no data-driven alerts. Data-driven alerts are not part of this move. Subscriptions at this time are not being moved. Any favorites or comments that may be associated with those workbooks or those views or those dashboards, those are items that are not being moved. If you want a tool that's going to take all of those information along with you to the new site, then you're probably going to want to select something like a site export and a site import process. Prep flows. At this point in time, prep flows are not part of the migration, but I'm sure it's something that the Tableau is working on to add. So now let's talk about TabMigrate. TabMigrate, I would say it started off as a lightweight tool to move content between multiple server environments. It's still, and this is what I grabbed from the TabMigrate GitHub page. And TabMigrate has really grown over time, but I think it's been able to maintain its simplicity or ease of use. It makes it really straightforward to move the content that you're looking to move. And with each iteration of the TabMigrate application, we're able to get more functionality, able to move more items from our source site to our target site, or from our source environment to our target environment. I would say it is a medium complexity because it is a separate application and it does require some level of customization when you get into it. Unlike CMT, you're not able to update parameters, or you're not able to update URL parameters, or you're not able to update your JPEGs or your text in transit like you can with CMT. So that I would say that is one benefit of the CMT, but a limitation of TabMigrate. But with TabMigrate, you are able to move schedules. You are able to move users, and you are able to move data sources and workbooks. And it's really great because the process of using TabMigrate is also fairly straightforward here. With the TabMigrate process, we start off by generating a CSV. And when we generate that CSV to gather our site's inventory, it is something that we can then load up into Tableau to really easily see how many workbooks do we have, how many data sources do we have, how many users do we have, what are our schedules, and really plan. And then from there, modify what we want to migrate. So we're modifying that CSV that's going to feed in step 1, that's going to feed into ultimately into step 3. When we're generating the CSV, it's good to inspect and then remove what we don't need, just so we're not taking the unwanted, the stale objects with us. Now, step 2 is the critical piece, because that's where we're actually doing the export of those contents. So TabMigrate sits on top of the REST API. So because it is, one thing I did miss here, it is community supported, which means although it is offered by Tableau. It is not officially Tableau supported. So if you were to have some issues using TabMigrate and you called support and tried to register a ticket, I don't know what level of support you would get. Generally, Tableau support will look through the logs for you and tell you what sort of exceptions they are seeing, but they will not troubleshoot your configuration of TabMigrate or troubleshoot your network, as I'm sure many of you have probably experienced here. One word of caution here in step 2, when we're exporting our contents to a local directory. So in step 1, we're essentially getting an inventory of what we want to move. And then in step 2, we're downloading those objects onto a directory. Now, if we are moving an entire site's worth of contents, it can be quite large. So one thing to make sure before you go into step 2 is take stock of the amount of disk space you have in the directory where your workbooks and your contents will go to. If you're trying to move too much content for your directory, the export will fail. But I did see, I was able to see some workarounds, such as creating a symbolic link. So anything coming into your export directory will get sent to wherever you want it to, into a directory that has enough capacity to store all of your contents. Another really nice thing about TabMigrate is that when you're planning to move, you can actually tag each bit of content that you're trying to move with whatever you want, and set that tag in the TabMigrate GUI. So if we're saying hashtag TabMigrate, go ahead and select all of our workbooks that we want to move, or all of our data sources that we're trying to move, and add them there prior to the export. Alternatively, you can also select a project and download the entire contents of that project. So now that we've selected our objects, we can go ahead and upload the file system into the site. And when we're uploading, again, so the process hasn't changed. We're downloading the content from Tableau Server, from our source site, into that local directory. Now that we've downloaded it, if we're not the owner, we are now the owner of those objects. So we need to make sure that we have the credentials associated with each bit of workbook and data source. And when it gets published again, TabMigrate will usually does a really good job of associating those objects with their previous owners, but also inserting those credentials back into those workbooks. So as long as we have that file, and you can structure it, I believe it's an XML structured file where we can place our data source connections and data source credentials. And when we go to upload, it'll reinsert those items into the connection. I see a question here. Is TabMigrate applicable for Linux distributions? Yes, I believe so. Because it is open source, when you go to download TabMigrate, you can actually download the tar files or the Windows executable files. API. So the Tableau API is no different than any other API. For the purposes of this discussion, I'm also including the Tableau Server client. And the Tableau Server client is really the Python library for interacting and managing Tableau Server and Tableau Server objects. When we're using the API, what we want to think about, or for me, I would rate it a high complexity level of methodology for migrating our content. Tableau may or may not troubleshoot your code. I would lean towards probably not. They're not going to look at anything that you've developed. But again, you are able to send them your logs, and they'll be able to tell you what exceptions are seen or what points of failure Tableau Server itself is seeing when it's trying to interact with your code. But for them to kind of comb over your code, I would imagine that's probably more of a services engagement. So they probably will not look at your code. So it's just something to keep in mind. But there is a huge community. I would also plug us. We're all here today. So There is a rather large community around the API, as well as Tableau Server management. So almost like Stack Overflow, we can post our parts of code and have people analyze them and hopefully get us to the finish line of migrating our content. Now, when we're using the API, and TabMigrate does sit on top of the API. So what the developers of TabMigrate have done is probably taken the most useful points of the API and put it into their application. With that said, the API is capable of, I would say, migrating almost everything, but it can create everything. And with that, for me, what that means is, while we cannot download schedules per se, we can download the information to recreate those schedules. So we're able to get the workbooks and the data sources in our schedules and our users, and we're able to use that to download and repoint and republish to our other environments. It is, again, it's platform agnostic. It's available on Tableau Online and Tableau on-prem or in the cloud. And we can use it in Linux or we can use it in Windows. And it's really good for migrating large amounts of objects. If you're going to take the time to write a script to download the objects, make it. This is definitely where you want to make it worth your while, and really understanding the nuances of what this means. So when we're saying we want to download the workbooks, that may be different as downloading a workbook that's connected to a published data source versus downloading a workbook that's connected to that is a packaged workbook. So those are two different nuances. And also, if we're looking to download favorites or custom views, those are all little bits of nuance that you'll want to investigate as you're going down this path. It does require, as most of you would probably assume, it does require some scripting and programming capabilities. So if you or your organization don't have that, I would not recommend it. But if you do, this is a really great way to get a hold of your content and move it. What was I going to say here? No. Yeah. Okay. So when I was trying to think of what picture to select when I'm talking about the export and import process, a big dump truck came to mind, because the export and importing site process is probably the most complete way to move the contents of a site. But just like when you're moving in real life, if you're gonna not take the time to get rid of the stale content, it's all gonna go along with you. But the process itself is fairly straightforward. I would, like I said, it's probably the most complete per site migration. It is supported since it is a series of commands that you run on Tableau Server. So you can send Tableau your logs and they will help troubleshoot your exporting and importing. Now you'll use it to move content between sites, but it does require some set of prep work in the target site. One of the downsides of using the export and import site process is the source site goes into a locked state. And so what that means is it will be inaccessible while it is in progress. So the Tableau server will still be available, but the particular site that you're in progress of exporting will not be available. Because you are now moving that content to somewhere new, that any sort of analytics that you were doing, viewership or interaction with those dashboards will go away because you're moving into a new instance of Postgres. And I add this bullet here, high failure rate. I don't know if how many people on the call today have attempted an export and import, but I would be shocked if anyone, their first time out the gate, was successful doing an import. The export piece, and I'll move into the steps here. The export and import process it's pretty straightforward, but it is very exact. And so when I mean exact, I mean if one bit of the process or one bit of your mappings are incorrect, or if you're missing a user, the import process will fail. And the import process can take several hours. So imagine several hours you're importing, and eventually your import fails. So it can be very frustrating. So the prep work in step 2 is critical to the process. So I kind of listed it here in 7 steps. We're starting with identifying the source site. Then we prep the target site. And what does that mean? When we're prepping the target site, that means adding all of the users in our source site. That means adding the schedules, or at least a 1-for-1 of the schedule. And if we're not going to use all of the schedules in our target site, that means we have to delete them in our source site before it gets moved. So a lot of planning is involved to make sure that we're able to go through this smoothly. Now, when would you want to do an export? You may want to do an export or an import, export import when you are when you're changing identity stores. I worked with a customer once that was moving from a local authentication to Active Directory, and they had 10 sites that they wanted to move, and each one of them had to be remapped. So when we're moving our users, or when we're creating our users have to be 1-for-1. So let's say we have 10,000 users on one site, those same, or 10,000 users must exist in our target site. And they don't necessarily have to be the same. Like in the case of when I was moving a large site for a customer, we had, I think it was around 10,000 users. And, the first, they were server, user at local, and now they were just going to be, user at their, client domain.com. And making sure that we had those mappings correctly was crucial to get it to work. It really is a critical piece. And that's probably where making sure that we have a 1-for-1 and being able to say, for every object in our source site, that is going to be a value in our target site. That is probably where the majority of us that have attempted the export and import site process have failed. This is really a really agonizing step. and I kind of belabor the point just because I've done it several times, and I've not done it. I don't think I've ever gotten it to work the first time out the gate, if I'm being honest here. Those of you that have had success first time out the gate, kudos to all of you on the call. Exporting the site is a fairly easy step. We're running, like I said, the site does get locked, so it becomes inaccessible for a point of time. And then the file is generated. Then we're going to generate those mapping files. So we're going to try to do the first import. And from that first import, we're going to generate those mapping files. And that's where we're going to the process of making sure we have those 1-for-1 values exist. So here is where those zombie users are going to really kind of bite you. I guess pun intended here. They will bite you, and your import will be unsuccessful. And unless you will either have to go back and remove those zombie users and assign the content to a current user that might regenerate the export, or you'll have to say, this person, user 123, has left the organization, but now we're going to assign all of 123's content to 456. So just making sure that we have that. And here using Postgres is a really great idea just to pool the users as part of your prep. I would say this is, pro tip here. Before you're going to, as you prep your target site, use Postgres to pool the list of users in your source site, and then use that same list to import in bulk into your target site. And that's probably really going to smooth things out. And you'll see immediately here where those zombie users are. You'll see user 123 does not exist. And so you'll have to, you'll need to reconcile that. So step 5 is verify that site settings are mapped correctly. And if you don't verify the site settings, you'll realize after 2 or 3 hours of attempting the import, once it fails, you'll see the errors. Import the correctly mapped files to the target site. So, the import process can take a few hours if you have a large site. I would also say that if you are unfamiliar with this process, or if you're yet to attempt it, start with a very small site. I would say it is probably worth it to start even with a practice site to export and import, just to get familiar with it. I think it will really help you as you go your journey on your journey to export and import that production site to a new environment. And then hopefully you'll have success. And finally, I'm going to finish up here quickly with the restore from backup. And I couldn't think of any other. The first word when I was thinking of restore from backup was the respawn, because that's essentially what you're doing. Thankfully, I would say that the restore from backup is a rather low complexity. It is for moving between environments. Usually, you're doing this when there's a server failure. So I'm glad that the process is easy. Because when you're doing it, you're probably under pressure. So this is great. The benefits here are that it is the most complete way to move content, but it is, keep in mind, the entire contents of your environment. So just considerations here, because you're going to be using this most likely under duress or under pressure. Make sure that you have your automated backups configured. And again, yeah, the restoration is server wide. So, I mean, that's really it that I have to cover today. Let's see, what questions do we have? See, what steps do you recommend to limit the need for a Tableau admin to have remote in as the user run as to the machine to make configuration changes? Our organization is going through a phase out process of Windows server accounts. We would like to limit the need to our run as users to make configuration changes after we upgrade. That way we can track changes better.
Yeah, this question from Jeffrey. Yeah, although it's nothing to do with the content migration moving, I'm thinking the answer. I don't know if I quite follow the question, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to reduce the needs of using the RNAS account remote in. I don't know for sure if I got this question.
To make the configuration changes. Limit the need for a Tableau admin to remote in as the run as user to the machine to make changes. So our organization is going through phase out process of server accounts. So they're getting rid of service accounts, it sounds like. And so how do we reduce that?
I don't know. I don't know the answer. I don't know. I don't think I understood the questions exactly, to be honest with you. Yeah.
So next question is a question for data sources with the user ID and password embedded connection. When developers publishing a workbook, will he need to provide an embedded database connection, user ID, and password? Will it be possible to configure the data sources, database connection, user ID, and password defined in Tableau on the server side? Data source.
Yes, and what do you mind if I answer this question? Okay. This is Mark. I always strongly recommend when people publish workbooks data sources on the server, no matter using live or extracts, I strongly recommend they embed the password. Okay. Embed the password doesn't mean that the server admin will see their password at all. Okay. All means is simplify the permission process. If you embed the password with the extracts, and data sources embedded as well, I mean, you can run the extracts fresh. Otherwise, if you don't embed the password, you cannot refresh your extracts. That's one. Secondly, if you publish data sources separately as a workbook, and if you do not embed the password, what it means is that when you assign the workbook permissions to 1,000 people, you also have to grant those 1,000 people access to the published data source that was published separately. That is double work, unnecessary. I know my answer may not be some of your use cases you may not agree with me. I know that, but 95% should be this case. There are some small use cases where you do not want to embed. Small use cases. I don't think I want to cover that. If you're interested, I can discuss with you more. But Jason, feel free to chat me yours.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with Mark that you definitely want to if there's a preference to embed those credentials. I guess, is it possible to configure the database, data sources, data connection, user ID defined on server side? It is, I would say, if you're looking to, I mean, it is also possible to create those data sources on the server side with the, if you web edit, because you can create a workbook from scratch, right? And if you are a creator, if you're a creator administrator, or if you're just a creator, you can create those data source connections, and then you can create your data source. Now, Tableau doesn't work like you just have a data connection there. So if I'm looking to connect to Exasol, I can connect to Exasol and then, based on whatever I need, create that connection. You want to create that connection and then create the data source at the same time. Tableau doesn't allow you just to have a connection on standby for, for whatever database that you're trying to connect to.
To make it short, the answer is yes, should unless there are like one or two really Tableau Jedis, they have different use cases. That's a corner case. So only the export. Okay.
Let's see. The next question I see here is: has anyone had a failure where the backup process was interrupted, and now the system can't seem to start the Postgres SQL service? Does this normally mean restoring from a previous backup, which causes the loss of an entire day's of workbooks and dashboards? I have not encountered this. I don't know, Mark, if you've seen this before.
Yeah, we see this. I mean, yeah, the backup failed. Yeah, restore failed. We had all those. It happens. Many different reasons can happen. Okay. We had a couple of those instances, unfortunately. Yeah, when it happens, you have to redo it. One time I had to drop my upgrade plan just because the restore failed. Okay, that backup failed also a couple of times. It happens. We also, in my team, I have a few Tableau really experts in the team. We are also figured out a way. One time we were able to fix it, just delete some files in the backup, but it's not for everyone. Okay.
Are there any free templates about Tableau Server documentation? I noticed the resources you provided today, but was wondering if there was anything in the migration process that can be used as documentation. Yeah, I would say there is tons of free resources. Tableau is great with documentation, so I would say that's the starting place. But determining, like, is there like a slick sheet or a decision tree that exists? I don't know that one exists. Let's see. Are there best practice? Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Mark.
When you answer one, can you just close that one?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you can just say type live, answer live, that just close.
Okay. I see. Okay. Let's see here. Are there best practices to avoid license issues when setting up a new server and moving data to it? Licensing issues, yes. So, I mean, it's all in the pre-work. So as long as we make sure that we're deactivating and then reactivating on our target site, I would say alternatively, the one workaround is using a temporary license or working with your rep to get a trial license to kind of hold you over if you're already using the other instances of your Tableau license. Probably another way to go. I see here, is MFA enabled on Tableau? If MFA is enabled on Tableau, will the migration work? The migrations usually work as long as there is access to through TSM. So if you're able to use TSM, then yes. What is the best way under this new method and old method to document what needs to be migrated between servers? Are there free templates about Tableau Server documentation? Not that I know of. It's really just a planning. It's a planning exercise determining what you need to move. I don't know. Have you heard of any templates, Mark?
I'm not. Be honest with you, I don't use this often. I try to avoid the move.
Absolutely. Just like in real life. Just like in real life, I want to move as little as possible.
Yeah, why you have to move? Sorry, just I'm not trying to discount things. I know there are use cases. I try to avoid.
Oh, I'm with you. I'm with you, Mark. And that was kind of that was my whole point behind today's talk. Is like this is something that people don't want to talk about it, but when you need to do it, you need to know the answers and need to know your options.
But let's talk about move a little bit. If some teams are still following the traditional waterfall approach that publish Tableau workbooks to the like test instance, a dev instance, then move to production, maybe it's time to consider change. Try to publish directly on the Tableau server, like maybe in the staging folder of the Tableau server. So your life will be much easier in terms of move. It's much easier to move workbook within the same sites from different project. As long as you are project leader on both source project, target project, you can move the content like workbook. Even the URL will not change. That's the best way to move. Okay, right? Jason, do you agree with me?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And that kind of leads to I think Tom's question is, do we know of anything new coming in the area of content migration? The newest thing I saw was the CMT, the content migration tool. I don't know if there's anything newer than that. Mark, have you heard of anything, or either Marks, have you heard of anything new in terms of what's coming down the pipe with content migration?
I haven't, no.
What, Mark, what did you say?
No, I'm afraid I haven't.
No, okay.
Let's see, this is related to an earlier question about a company changing its domain name and how to update email addresses in bulk. Would it be the same or similar REST API to update all server logins from one domain to another?
Yeah, I answered that question in the text. Let me talk this a little bit more. There are multiple questions came in the server admin forum asking about how do we change the user name? Many different reasons that things are changed. You want to change it, Tableau server username. The short answer is not possible. Okay, but there was scenario where the way I recommend to go, okay, like this example, the whole company is changing email address, and you use old email address as username. How do we deal with that? My recommendation is do not change your username, but change your user's display name. Are you with me? If you're not quite sure what I'm talking about, you just Google it. There is a Tableau server, there is a username, there is a display name. The display name is what you see on Tableau server everywhere. The username is only you see when you use REST API. Okay.
I would say this reminds me of the situation where I was moving, and the reason we were moving contents or moving environments was because initially they were local authentication. Then they were moving to Active Directory. So to me, this is almost like it's like like Robert says, related to changing a company domain name. So if before I was at clientsite.com, now I'm Jason at, I don't know, usersite.com. The way you would do this is with an export and import. So, but hopefully all of your users are valid and you're going into the same site, or, if you're going into the same site, everything should not change. So that hopefully it's a smooth export import process for you.
So Jason, that's what you recommend is different approach. You are just saying export all the users, change your user. Yeah.
The way I'm understanding this is if the domain is changing, does that also mean that the service account domain is also changing? So would they have to do, would they have to reinstall Tableau server or update that service account so that it's still valid? I guess that's how I'm understanding the Robert's question.
Okay, I see. So I guess right now there are two options. Okay, one is Jason's recommendation where you download whole user, export the whole user, then you import again. But when you import, using the new domain name.
Yeah, it's part of the mapping process.
So the URL, okay. What about permission? What about subscription? All the others will be changed automatically?
Yes, and that's why it's really complete. When you export a site and import the site, it's very complete. And if the domain is the only thing that's being changed, it would just be in the mapping process. When you're mapping the users, you would say, user 123 is now user 456.
I see. So completely change it everywhere on the server. Okay. Oh, that's great. That's good. That's another approach. I have not tried that. Okay. But Jason, sounds like you have done this. That's good. That's good.
I hope you never have to, Mark.
So what I did is my situation was a server merge. Okay, I have an existing server. Then there's another server. They want to merge to my server. The merge the server, they have a different username. Okay, they want to change that. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that's a little different.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, it really depends on like how much is changing, I guess.
Okay.
The next question.
Good different perspective. Yeah.
We've recently been told to execute a manual backup. Do you have pointers or information on this process or step-by-step procedure? There's lots of good content out there. I think it's either Information Lab or Interworks. They have great examples of that you can use as a template, as a starting point if you're trying to automate this process, the backup process. That's what we do. We have a batch. We're on Windows, so we have a batch script that we have on a task scheduler that will run nightly to do this process. And as part of the process, we have it saved on an external directory. So I guess that's my answer.
Hold on as well for this one. Let me give you a link. Back to last summer, I had a presentation, Zen Master Guide to Tableau Server Admin 101. I'm going to give you the link. That covers the backup. How do you do the backup? Also, I believe I gave a resource link, even a slides resource link on details, the scripts you can leverage. Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's see. Does Tableau support Azure DevOps CI for auto deployments, or any way to integrate with content migration with Azure DevOps? I'm not sure. We can integrate content migration with Azure. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know that answer.
Either. I don't know that.
Okay, let's see here. If I change the database server name for a data source using API, will the data source work against the new DB server? Yes. It is created with OAuth authentication. Yeah, that should work.
Okay, let me just close this.
Did you say TabMigrate changes the ownership of all content to the person who runs the migration, or does it retain ownership and are permissions reapplied? If you don't change anything in the TabMigrate process, it will reassign ownership. So because it is what's under, like I was saying, that what's happening under the covers in TabMigrate, it does download all of the workbooks as the person that's running the object, because you have to, step one is sign into the server. So you'll sign in as your server admin, and it will download all of the workbooks that you're trying to move. So that means you are now the owner of these objects. When you go to upload, there is a checkbox that says assume ownership. So you can check that, and it will try to reconcile all of the previous ownership. So technically yes, but it will, I would say, do its best to reassign the previous ownership. I think those are the questions. Can either one of the tools allow you to add initial SQL to the? Yes, the CMT does. The content migration tool will allow you to. Can I delete the Tableau user that was created during installation? Want to free up the creator license? I wouldn't. If I'm giving advice, I wouldn't usually that's like your run as account as well. So you could, if you're trying to, but that person, that creator license that you're reassigning to will have to have, someone will need to have those TSM, 8850 privileges to log in. Does TabMigrate keep, oh, hold on. Will the embedded passwords get lost using the site import and export? No, because it's taking an image, it's essentially taking a backup of the site. So everything that's there is not touched. So the embedded password should persist.
That's good to know. I did not try that. I didn't know this. Thank you. Yeah.
Can an admin mimic another user to test? That's really broad. To test.
You wish you can. You wish you can.
The only place where I know you can do that is on Tableau Desktop, where in the bottom right-hand corner you can say view as this user.
That's more like a rule level security, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know sometimes you want to like mimic how other users look like. Unfortunately, I don't think that the feature is valuable. I don't know how.
That's actually probably a pretty good a feature request submission.
I wish I can. Yeah.
That's actually a good idea. Are the set custom SQL data source transformations always a total replacement of the SQL query, or are there other options string replacement supported? Custom SQL data source. I'm not sure. Let me reread this. Maybe it'll come to me. As far as I know, this is the only one. Yeah. Well, there's about 4 minutes left. Any closing remarks? I mean, I hope today we've gone through quickly the options that are available when you're looking to move content. You've heard from Mark and myself that this is something nobody really wants to do, just like in real life. But if you have to do it, there are tools available to you, and you have options. So, and plan your migration, get rid of the zombie content, get rid of the zombie users especially, and choose your weapon, I guess.
All right, last question, Jason, before we close.
Let's see. For admin to mimic another user, create a test, use account, and assign it to permissions. Yeah, good call.
Say again, I don't get it.
Julia is saying just to create a test user with the same permissions if they want to mimic, and then you can log in as that test user.
Well, that means if you don't have a single sign-on. If you have a single sign-on, anybody on the server, most of us do. I don't see how, Julia.
That's true.
All right, thank you very much, Jason. Yeah, sure. You want to answer a few more, or we can close here? Up to you.
Yeah, no, we can close here. I was going to say, if assuming that you're able to, your organization allows you to create test users, assuming you're in production.
I see. Yeah. Okay. If you, that's a more advanced use cases. Even there is single sign-on. If you have a machine, if you as admin know the machine name URL, you can get there using local user test. But I will not promise my user this is what I do. It creates more work for you. I don't know it's the value. Be honest with you. Thank you very much, Jason, for your awesome presentation. For the audience, thank you very much for participate. And next month, I'll be presenting the Tableau tips, tricks around Tableau projects. I got a lot of tips I can share with you next month. All right, with this, have a great rest of Friday, and also have a great weekend. Stay home and stay safe. Bye, everyone.